Hey everybody, Danny Maude here. Thanks for joining us. In this short game video, what I'm going to do is I'm not just going to give you a standard short game lesson from Perfect Lies. We're going to go around the green and give you a system, firstly, to identify what you're doing wrong with your chipping. Secondly, to then cure your chipping, show you how to strike it, learn distance control, but more importantly, transfer that new technique to many little shots around the green. So rough shots, horrible hard lies where there's no maybe grass. And how do you control your distance? We're going to cover all of that in this week's session. Plus, I've got a really cool drill that's probably going to help too. Now, before I get into the lesson, if you're new to the channel, it's one of your first videos of mine, please consider subscribing. I release videos just like this one every single week to try and help you improve your game. Plus, you never have to remember a thing. I'll always put a free downloadable practice guide in the description box below. So before we get into the technique, to become a great chipper, you need to know one key distinction between your normal shots, your iron shots, your driving and chipping. When you're hitting a normal shot, we're actually trying to achieve one thing. We're actually trying to hit the golf ball. In fact, we're actually trying to compress the ball, right? Put the club on the ball, hit the ground afterwards and hit a nice powerful shot. With the short game, we are trying to do something completely different. And this distinction alone, when I give it to my students, makes a massive difference. When we're playing short game shots, we are focused more on the ground interaction rather than the ball interaction. So I'm more concerned with how your club is going through the ground, because we need to get the club underneath the ball, not on the ball, right? So it's more important how this club interacts through the ground as opposed to how it reacts with the ball itself. Let me give you a simple analogy on how this works. Okay, so this is a great analogy. It will give you a great image for short game. So unlike a normal shot where we normally compress this golf ball, we need to get the club interacting with the ground. So I've got a big block of butter to show you. Our job is to get this spoon underneath this golf ball, okay? So what needs to happen? Well, this is the leading edge of your golf club right here. This section here is your bounce. And we've got to get that leading edge, cutting through the butter, down into the butter, and underneath that ball. And what's going to happen when you do this, the leading edge is going to go in, the bounce will kick in just underneath the ball, and then roll straight out of that butter. Very different to what I see with most players. Most players basically do this. They get the leading edge cutting in here almost like a knife. And if you took a knife through the butter, what's going to happen? The knife's just going to cut straight through and will never come out, okay? This is when you fat it. What we want to happen is this becomes your spoon now. This is the leading edge of the spoon. This is the base of the spoon. We call the bounce in golf. We want that to dig in, okay? But then we want it to work underneath the ball. So it looks like a U-shaped motion. So that's how I'd love you to start to interact with the ground. Let's show you now how you start setting up for that and how you transfer that to all shots around the green. Okay, so let's start to apply this analogy to a really simple position like this. So I've got a 56 degree wedge here. And remember, we're going to try to create this U-shaped motion of the club head underneath that golf ball. And I want you to be focused on ground interaction, how the club interacts with the ground, not with how it interacts with the ball so much, okay? So if, for instance, your club, I want you to pay attention to this, do some swings and pay attention to how your club is interacting with the ground. If it hits the ground behind the golf ball, fine, but where does it hit the ground and how? If it hits the ground and leaves a little bit of a mark, you know that the leading edge is cut into the ground. We don't want that. That means your spoon has dug too much and is going like a knife into the ground, okay? You might hit the ground behind the golf ball, but the spoon's hitting so far behind and working upwards that you might thin it into the back of the ball and thin those balls over the back of the green. So again, we want that U-shape happening just behind the ball so that the bounce can kick in underneath that golf ball. That's what we're after. So do that inventory. So I'm going to hit you a couple of shots here. And the way I set up to this, square face, elbow just soft here into the side. Then I put my lead hand on. All I'm going to do now is visualize that ground interaction underneath the golf ball. Look at the speed there. I get some spin, I get some check. Why? Because as that club slips underneath that golf ball, the ball zips up that face and creates that little checker that we want, okay? I want you to master this one first before we go into these complicated ones. And if you still struggle with this one, this excellent drill here I've used for a number of different shots will certainly help. take the ball, get it in line with your lead foot here, and take your trail foot and move it behind you here. What this is going to do is going to line everything up, which is key for chipping. Your sternum, the shaft, the ball position, and therefore when you swing, where's the U now? That's directly, isn't it, underneath that golf ball. That's where we want it to be, yeah? So if you try to get down on it, you're going to lose your balance forward. If you kind of try and scoop it and get the spoon too far behind, you're going to fall backwards. So again, really great way to develop a good sense of feeling with this motion here. It will really, see the check there? It will really get that U absolutely spot on. Try that. Once you've mastered this, let's go around the green now and try to adapt it, show you how to adapt this to more difficult lies. So the second lie we're going to look at is the one that's buried under the grass. Now think of it this way. There's the butter analogy again. If that ball is buried, what are you going to have to do with this spoon to get that spoon underneath that ball? The first thing we're going to have to do is throw it a little bit steeper into the butter so we can get a gouge out and then scoop it out. If we come in too shallow, the bounce is going to kick in and we're probably going to thin it. So we've got to come down a little bit steeper, throw it a little bit harder to get underneath. It's exactly the same principles as this shot here. So using the same 56-degree wedge, here's a couple of alterations. Here, we're in deep rough. Obviously, we want to get the ball popping up a little bit higher. I'm going to move the ball a bit further forward in my stance, just a fraction. Okay, setup remains the same. Soft right arm here, trail arm here. And all I'm going to do now is this. I'm going to visualize that club simply being thrown slightly deeper into the ground behind. But what I'm doing is I'm not driving it deeper. I want the club to be thrown. So I'm going to get this heel and top edge here all completely lining up at impact, not driving like this, okay? So literally releasing down, so because I want that spoon to come out of the butter, I want the wedge to come out of the ground once it goes into the ground, okay? So we're just, all we're doing really is kind of getting a feel for that and judging that. Let's see this in action. Nice, simple. Look at that. Just pops up beautifully. You'll notice here as well how my club's kind of stopped fairly short. That is because I'm more focused on the ground interaction, and the ground itself is acting as a braking system for my club. All I'm doing is throwing the club into the ground, that goes underneath the ball pops up, and it makes what looks like a difficult shot very, very easy. So before I get onto the lie that everybody hates, let's look at this one. This is a shot that you can show off to your friends with. You've short-sighted yourself. You need the ball to get up really quickly, land softly. What changes do you need to make? Well, the principles of the butter remain the same, but I'm now going to choose a 60-degree wedge, more loft. I'm also going to do with the 60-degree, I'm actually going to open it up a little bit so it adds even more loft. The ball position, when you want height, needs to go further forward in your stance. So I'm actually moving the ball now opposite my lead heel here, okay? Then what I'm going to do is this is crucial. When I look at that leading edge now, it's angled this way. It's actually angled and pointing in front of my lead toe. That's how I know it's open. From here, now I don't want to, when it gets to impact, leave it like that and create a dragging effect. That will get the ball slicing, you could thin it, you could do all kinds of stuff. I want the club, just like all the shots we've talked about, to not jab, but to bottom out, okay? So what I'm going to do here is this. I'm going to work on trying to get that toe working back so it starts to line up with the heel. Now when that happens, notice this. Where do you see my hands? They actually look slightly now behind the club head. This is how you start to release and add more loft to your shots, whilst at the same time keeping them going beautifully straight, okay? Now what I like about this, when I do this, is it also gives me an idea of, when I rehearse it, where my body's going. Look, my body's going through. Okay, so it gives me an idea of, okay, maybe roughly that's where I want to be moving towards, i.e. my end product. Same as what you need to maybe be feeling, okay? So when we get ourselves set, you need to build that routine in. So take your time, be nice and confident, no jerkiness, throw the club through that ball with a decent amount of confidence, okay? So we get ourselves set, open the club face, visualize that toe catching up with the heel or lining up with the heel impact, and then fully commit to the shot. Watch the elevation. That's absolutely beautiful. Oh, really, really, really close. So that is how you play the beautifully floating lob shot, okay? Let's now look at the shot that everybody hates. So change of location, change of lie. This is now a hard lie. You've got no grass underneath the golf ball, hits rock hard. It's like playing that or trying to get that ball out of the butter now. You just can't go into the body, it's frozen solid. So ultimately you still want to create the U-shaped, but now the leading edge of that butter just needs to catch it perfectly. So this is when ultimately everything we've worked on so far is paramount, okay? We want that shaft completely lined up. We want the leading edge here lined up, the toe lining up with the heel at impact, okay? No driving, no falling back, everything here completely lined up so that the club comes through and then look, works upwards in the U-shaped fashion, okay? Let's have a look at this in action. So I get myself set in exactly the same way, still got a 56-degree wedge. So the key here is just again, visualize that U-shape and really commit to the shot. Spin will come in now, look. Oh, very, really close. So the key to this session isn't just about technique. The key is to remember you have to practice with variability. We've tried 3 or 4 different lies there. When you're practicing, practice loads of different lies. Absolutely pointless going from the same spot every single time. It's not about developing a consistent technique. The aim is to become consistent at chipping by actually practicing inconsistent lies so that you get used to how that spoon interacts with the ground, and that's the key takeaway. Focus on ground interaction, not ball interaction, okay? Remember the drill as well, it's super, super helpful. Now, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, maybe share it with one of your friends who's maybe new to the channel or struggling with their short game. It'll super, super help. And remember, I put a free download practice guide in the description box below. Remember also, here, this chipping technique you're going to see here, right, is a very, very basic one just for the ones on the edge of the green. If you just want a simple one that gives you the chip and run, this is the one to maybe look at next. But until next week, have a wonderful golfing week.